With the burning yellow eyes and a sickly smile painted in red, Pennywise is indeed the scariest creature in King's multiverse of monsters. But you know what's even more terrifying? A psychic vampire feeding on your emotions, hiding beneath the mask of just a regular old man. To be precise, we're talking about Dandelo, a monster very similar to it in terms of its origin and nature. But what exactly is it about Dandelo that makes it as dangerous as Pennywise? Is there a chance Dandelo could just be another monstrous form of it? To answer all these questions in today's video, we're going to talk about this famous Dark Tower monster to get to know it better. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Species connection: Dandelo and Pennywise. Pennywise and Dandelo share the exact origin, but there are some fundamental differences between them. Both belong to the same tribe, the Glamours, and originated in the macroverse, the infinite void that exists outside our world. Yet Pennywise is more like a primary entity, while Dandelo appeared much later in the macroverse and traveled to Earth. Dandelo, who appeared in the last book of the novel series The Dark Tower, is known to be a creature from the Todash Darkness, much like the macroverse, which also created the Deadlights, the ancient form of Pennywise. Despite having the same origin, Pennywise targets kids as his victims to feed on their fear, while Dandelo feeds on joy and laughter. And his victims could be anyone, mostly adults. Dandelo lives on a road called Odd Lane in the White Lands of Empathica, not very far from the Dark Tower, unlike Pennywise, who lives under the sewer of Derry, Maine. Maybe, just like Derry was one of the thinnies for Pennywise, for Dandelo, it was Empathica where he landed from the other world. Feeding methods and psychological horror. While they may be of the same kind, they contradict each other in various ways. While Pennywise, dressed as a clown, feasts upon fear, Dandelo, dressed as an ordinary man, sucks life out of the humans by making them laugh. Just like Pennywise has an alias, Bob Gray, Dandelo's only human alias is Joe Collins, who introduces himself to his victims by this name. He also mentions that he used to be a stand-up comedian doing shows in the US, so it's in his nature to be funny. But that's where he tricks his victims, just like he did to Ronald and Susanna when he invites them to his Odd Lane house. By making them laugh, Dandelo was almost killing them, until Susanna, upon discovering a lesion on her skin, went to the bathroom, where she found the truth behind Joe Collins' actual identity from a note left by none other than Stephen King, the author of the book. Susanna then shot the creature to death and saved Patrick Danville, who was locked out in the basement of the house. Patrick Danville is a young artist who we also know from King's other famous novel, Insomnia, where he was prophesied to play a huge role in defeating the Crimson King. But Dandelo captured him and slowly fed on his emotions until one day Susanna intervened. After getting shot, Dandelo transformed back to his accurate form as an insectoid, but the gunshot fatally wounds him and takes his life. So, even though his threat level is serious and may look more dangerous than Pennywise's feeding on fear technique, Dandelo might not be as powerful as this clown monster, who's a nearly invincible creature. Manifestation of powers and illusions. The dark influence of Pennywise doesn't confine itself to a single victim, but it also affects an entire town in Maine. Pennywise, who can change his form and shapeshift into multiple appearances, can create illusions that seem very close to reality. Frightened by these horrific illusions, people often succumb to Pennywise's deadlights and fall into a catatonic state before being devoured by the monster. But Dandelo doesn't have that many skills to manipulate his victims for long enough or make them catatonic through the deadlights. He just manipulates them enough to make them laugh so that he can suck the life juice out of his victims. For example, Patrick Danville, who lost his tongue because of this torturous method of Dandelo, or Ronald, who was on the brink of death as a result of the uncontrollable laughter. But Dandelo, unlike Pennywise, couldn't control the minds of his victims or influence an entire town to make them commit violence. His powers are limited to his capacity to make jokes and puns as his deadly hunting strategy. Theoretical lineage and Dark Tower canon. Pennywise's final form in the novel was a giant female spider who laid eggs all over the sewer, much like Dandelo's final and most actual appearance as an arachnoid creature. So fans speculate whether these two share a familiar bond, like siblings or maybe a mother-son connection. A famous theory suggests that at the end of It, when the loser destroyed the spider's eggs, maybe one of them survived and later hatched into a monster offspring called Dandelo. Maybe instead of remaining in Derry, this one egg slipped into one of the thinnies and ended up in Empathica. While the offspring theory has been pretty famous amongst the fans, some call it a cousin of Pennywise, as they both belong to the macroverse and serve the same entity called Crimson King. But that's also speculative, as the author himself never established a direct connection between these two creatures in any of his novels. Vulnerabilities and defeat. As we said earlier, Pennywise is a more powerful entity and far superior to Dandelo. It's tough to find the weaknesses of Pennywise, as no matter how much you try to beat the monster, there's some sort of energy from its deadlights that never truly dies. However, as it feeds on fear and entirely depends on this particular emotion, the lack of fear can make him extremely vulnerable, often psychologically injure him as well. Just like we saw in the film adaptation of the novel, where the losers made him feel inferior and finally ripped his heart out, killing him. Although it's up for debate whether the monster truly perished or if it's just one of his physical forms that was destroyed. Also, it's pretty hard to destroy the deadlights, which may be out there in the world looking for a different form. On the contrary, Dandelo was easily defeated by Susanna, as it's clearly vulnerable to weapons, especially bullets, which can cause it to bleed to death. Also, Dandelo is highly vulnerable when someone uncovers his truth and identifies him as a threat. Instead of being persuasive, Dandelo fails to hide the truth and transforms back into his insectoid form. So in terms of vulnerabilities, one might argue that Dandelo is easier to beat than Pennywise because Susanna only needed a few bullets to kill it, whereas it took the losers more than 27 years to finally put an end to Pennywise. Author's commentary and canonical differences. King has always been vocal about his inspiration behind Pennywise and his intentions behind creating this creature. He said he wanted to make one binding, horrible, nasty, gross creature, like this terrifying dancing clown, but King is never explicitly seen talking about his intentions or inspirations for creating Dandelo. However, he clarified that all sibling or offspring theories, and even the speculation that Pennywise and Dandelo are the same creature, are not true at all. Both are the same species, created in the same eternal void before coming to Earth, but they are very different from each other. He mentioned that Dandelo relies heavily on emotional vampirism, just as fear and other negative emotions do. But that doesn't make Dandelo as powerful a manipulator as Pennywise, whose menace has always been far superior in the canon. Marvelous verdict. Maybe not as powerful as Pennywise, but Dandelo is a menacing villain in the Dark Tower novel, and a very unpredictable threat because of his disguise as a seemingly ordinary guy who causes no harm and just makes you happy. So maybe not for Pennywise, but Dandelo is a hazardous monster for its victims. And on that note, our video is over. If you liked our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave a comment with your thoughts on Dandelo and Pennywise's relationship. Goodbye, and see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone!